Hello and welcome to another episode of Bunny Hugs and Mental Health, free safe space for people to share and learn from others' experiences with mental health and addictions. I'm Todd Runnebaum, suicide attempt survivor and a recovering substance abuser. Welcome to another episode. This one's going to be very different. It is more kind of documentary kind of style. Back in October, I was at Mental Health Symposium for Youth. Be Kind to Your Mind was the theme this year. It was held by Youth Matter organization in Melfort, Saskatchewan, and they are a non-for-profit organization created by Laura Lawrence. There's a board and all types of volunteers and all types of wonderful people that organize this thing. And they also have, I think it's once a month on Tuesdays, on a certain Tuesday, they have Teen Talk Tuesdays, so teens can go online and join a conversation about mental health and listen to a guest speaker. I've been a guest speaker on there, and I spoke at the symposium last year. This year, I was just there to record and just take in the festivities. They have different events and a whole bunch of different speakers and things, and well, you'll see in this episode. So without further ado, I give you Youth Matter, Be Kind to Your Mind, Symposium. The day began with children piling into the Carrie Vicker Center in Melfort, Saskatchewan, one of the gymnasiums where they registered, and the whole gym was buzzing with the life of young people talking and excitement, and just happy not to be in class, I think. Once all the schools got there and were registered, they piled into the amphitheater where they did some introductions and some opening ceremonies, as well as a performance from a local dance group, an opening prayer with an elder before heading off to their separate rooms, to their separate speakers and separate events. One of the first speakers I saw was Daniel Hearn. He's been on the podcast before. He's a podcaster. His show is called Hard Knocks Talks. He talks about recovery and addictions, based out of Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. And here's some highlights from his talk.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Daniel Hearn. I am the creator, producer, and host of a live streaming video podcast called Hard Knocks Talks out of Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. When I was 13 years old, the opportunity finally came to me. I got my hands on a six-pack, and my first drunk was a blackout. Like, I don't know if you were listening to Brad earlier. He was saying after my first drink, after my second drink, this happened. After my third drink, there was none of that for me. I drank until I blacked out. 13 years old. I woke up the next morning covered in piss. My pants were across the room from me. The bed I was in was soaking wet. And you'd think that might be something that would clue a person in. Like, maybe this ain't all it's cracked up to be. But I went to school the next day on Monday morning, and I bragged. I bragged about the mess that I made. I bragged about how drunk I got and that I don't remember anything, like it was some sort of rite of passage. And I moved to Saskatoon when I was 16 years old, and almost instantly I found marijuana, and almost instantly I was selling it. What I considered to be normal, it continued on. I became I'm an interprovincial journeyman welder. I got good jobs. I went working up north. I went to Fort McMurray. I bought a house. I had a truck. I had a race car. But every time I would go out of town for those 20 days or, there's these rotations, I wouldn't drink. And not because I couldn't. It was because I just genuinely did not have the desire to drink when I wasn't in that social environment where I felt I needed to be tough. The weekends turned into Wednesdays, turned into Thursday mornings, Friday mornings, and then we found meth. And in fact, I introduced her to meth. She had never tried it before. I managed to get a job for a little while. And then one day I come home, and my now common-law wife curls up beside me saying, with all of the tenderness and compassion and soft touch that she could muster, that she was pregnant. So we tried very quickly to get off. We tried, we can wean down by ourselves. We can handle this, as though we haven't tried to do it 100 times in the past. We knew we had a problem by this point. That was not a secret. We were going through $1,000 a day, and we weren't coming by that money honestly. our son was born. And he was born healthy. There was complications at birth. Perhaps that's a story for another day. Life went on. We're parents now. 6 months goes by. We figure we're doing so good. We can do a little cocaine, just this one time. And off we go. Cocaine turned into meth, turned into daily use, turned into me being unemployable, turned into me being a dumpster diver, turned into me with my house going into foreclosure, and some dangerous people started showing up. And on November 30th of 2016, 2 social workers and 2 police officers came to our home 3 days after my son's 3rd birthday, and they apprehended my son. And one day my mom shows up. My mom has been in the addictions field in Saskatchewan for now 40 years. She's retired now. And I like to thank her for her service. She took me out for lunch. And she sat me down and she started saying, Dan, you need to go back up north. Dan, you need to put some money away. You need to get some stable housing. You need to do this. You need to do that. You need to get your son back, man. And I stopped her and I said, Mom, don't I need to get sober first? And the light came on in her eyes and she said, yes! And she pulled out a paper and it was all filled out with today's date. She said, sign there. And I did. And 10 days later, I walked through the detox doors at Thorpe Recovery Center in Lloyd. That was February 12th, 2017. I've been sober since that day. I went to the meetings. I got into a sober living house. I got supervised access to my son every 2 weeks. 2 hours every 2 weeks turned into 3 hours. Then it turned into once a week. Then it turned into 6 hours. Now I've got my son overnights in a sober living house. And on July 31st of 2017, I was awarded full intern custody of my 3-year-old son. Life continues on. And then one day, my wife's dad comes to my house and he says, Donna's back. And you'd think I'd be happy. You'd think that, oh, thank God my son's mom has survived. She didn't die on the streets with those terrible things that were happening. But I was angry. I was angry because she left. She left and terrible things happened. And I had built this identity of being the single father. We tried to get along, but we ended up in court, custody, family court. Out of all of the shit that I just told you guys, family court was the closest time I had ever come to suicide. So now we have 50-50 custody. We're taking drug tests again just to make sure. And we have to be friends on Fridays now because that's the transition day. And then eventually it turned into me coming in and visiting for a bit, checking in, talking a little bit recovery. And eventually it turned into, why don't you stay for supper? A voice came to me that sounded just like my own, but I'm not sure. And it said, you should start a podcast. And I said, who said that? I barely knew how to open a Word document. Like, I'm an old school welder, tradesman, blue collar. So I went with it, and I called my friends, and I put it on Facebook. I'm like, I'm going to start a podcast. And they're like, yeah, I'll come on. And on February 12th of 2021, the very first episode of Hard Knocks Talks went live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch TV. At the end of the school year, my mom said, what are you going to do over summer for money? And I said, I'm going to podcast. And she said, that's crazy. A few months after that, on one of our Friday nights, we're sitting and visiting Donna and I, and she says, man, look what you're doing. And I said, well, why don't you start a podcast? We've got this streaming studio. And it wasn't a month later that the very first episode of Phoenix Fire went live. And it was after her very first episode that I knew something had changed. And her and I, after that episode, we had a conversation and we reconciled that day, and we have been together, and she's brought a beautiful little girl into my life. We've been together ever since, building this platform, healing our family in recovery, and just trying to help people find a safer way to live. I've come to realize in my life that there is nothing more important than relationships. There is nothing more important than showing up for the people that love you. And there's nothing more important than showing up for each other.
Thanks to many sponsors of the event, the kids were able to have some pizza for lunch. So during lunch, I was able to grab some people from the crowd and have a quick interview with them, see how the event was going for them, and just how important it was to them that they were here.
You talk at Teen Talk Tuesday?
Yes.
And you're a teen?
Yes.
And you talk?
Yes.
On Tuesdays?
Yes.
Well, what inspired you to do that?
I saw them at some of these youth symposiums I've been to.
Oh, okay.
And I just was like, I need a group. I need someone who will just support me.
Have you met some wonderful people?
Yes. As I've met Lauren and Bailey, they're the two main ones. And there's a few, like a lot of other teens that are there, and it's all over Saskatchewan. So you're meeting more than just in my community.
Right. And today's going well?
Yes.
Who's your favorite speaker?
There's a lot of different speakers here.
Which speaker do you relate to the most so far today?
I've related to, I think her name was Jess.
Mm-hmm.
And she was her story was just a lot like how my story kind of is.
Uh-huh. So you have a story of your own which inspired you to get into this. Gotcha. Okay, great, thanks.
So I've been a volunteer with Youth Matter for a year now, and I do the support for Teen Talk.
Oh, so on Teen Talk Tuesdays?
Teen Talk Tuesdays, yeah. So me and another social worker, we rotate months, and we provide support to individuals who are needing, if they're triggered or needing support. So my friend Bailey actually connected with me. I started my own business with mental health. And so she knew kind of the avenue I was going down, and I love that they support youth and mental health and wellness. So I jumped on and I haven't left.
Do you feel the system is good?
No. No, I do not. So that was one of the reasons why I developed my own private practice, because there does need to be more support. And so to have Youth Matter as the nonprofit to engage with all of these students is a great thing, just so they know that they're not alone, and then we can now direct them into other programs or supports that they might need or want, but there definitely needs improving.
After lunch, the kids got to watch a couple of performances, one from a local student who sang a beautiful song, the other by Terrence Littletent. Terrence is an Indigenous dancer. He specializes in the hoop dance, and he's done it all over the world. He's even danced for Michael Jackson. The kids love him. He's high energy. His dance is amazing. So that got the kids out of their after-lunch slump and fired up for a few more speakers and a few more events. Youth Matter makes sure that there's a large Indigenous representation when it comes to the speakers and the performers. There's a large Indigenous population amongst the children in the area. And when it comes to culture, it's very important for mental health and addictions and recovery to be able to feel represented and to see people of your own culture doing well.
So let's give Terrence a big warm round of applause.
Good afternoon. How everybody doing there? Good stuff, good stuff. All right, so again, I'm very honored to be asked to come out here once again this year. And we went through some trials and tribulations for the last 4 years with COVID. But again, a lot has changed for myself. For those that don't know me, I'll introduce myself. My name is Terrence Littletent. I'm from the Kawakatus Cree Nation, but born and raised in Regina. I'm a traditional hoop dancer. Also travel the world, hoop dancing, educating our non-native people. So I'm gonna give you guys 5 minutes of my time, of your time, to kind of unpack who I am. So today, I'm sharing with you the special dance, which is the hoop dance. So when I go and speak about the hoop dance, I always try to explain what this dance means to me and how it saved my life. At the age of 8, the hoop dance was introduced to me. At that time in life, I was going through a lot. I was going through an identity crisis, not knowing my culture, my language, my way of life. And so, trying to find my means and my purpose here on Mother Earth. So at the age of 8, I was freshly out of foster care. So my mother and father were alcoholics through my whole childhood of that time. So I was trapped in this cycle of intergenerational addictions trauma due to the fact of my mother and father came from residential school. So my father, he stayed most of his life in there, dealing with the traumas. And when he left, he was old enough to leave, he came home to his whole community, and they turned their back on him. So that took a big impact on my father, trying to find his roots back to where he came from, but coming home to people turning on him, even family. So what he turned to was alcohol, to suppress all of that anger, that trauma. My mother, too, was taken from her home, and she has little recollection of her experience because it was so much she experienced and seen, so she doesn't remember a whole of it. So my mom also turned to alcoholism. So today, I'm fortunate to have my beautiful parents still with me today. They've been clean and sober for 38 years. So growing up in that environment, I learned a lot from my parents. I listened to my elders, I listened to my parents. I listened to the stories of residential school, alcoholism, drugs, addictions. And today, by picking up this dance, this is what I say, this is what saved my life. It's not because I was dying from an illness, it's because I was dealing with that intergenerational alcohol addictions, trauma. At the age of 14, I broke that cycle. At the age of 45 years old, I've never drank alcohol in my life. I've never done drugs in my life, let alone smoked a cigarette in my life. It's because of this dance and the purpose and the meaning behind this specific dance that I'm going to share with you here today. So, you guys ready?
The next speaker that I heard was Ali Herbachik, and she is an Indigenous woman, an entrepreneur, and an advocate, and just an incredible person in general.
So I'm Ali. I am the owner, baker, and educator at Ali's Creative Bake Shop. I am a self-taught baker. I'm heading into my 5th year of business. I am a mom. I have 3 kids. I have a 3, 4, and 5-year-old. I had them back to back, which technically makes me a little bit crazy. So I am also a wife. So my husband and I have been together for 8 years. I am the daughter of a residential school survivor, and I'm also the granddaughter of an Indian hospital survivor. So my mom went to residential school at LeBret for 3 years, I believe. Honestly, I don't know all the details because trauma. We don't talk about that much stuff when it comes to the deep, dark past, even though it's all surfacing in our world today. And then my grandma went to an Indian hospital when she was, I think, 5 to 9. And She lived in a hospital that was also like a TB hospital, which I don't know if you guys know much about that, but TB back in her day and age was like rampant. Yep, so she ended up leaving that hospital with one lung totally missing, no language, and practically no family. So, as you can imagine, from all that trauma that stemmed from her upbringing, how do you love when you've never been loved? That was the teaching that she passed on to my mom. And my mom, in turn, when she had me at 17, because I'm a daughter of a teenage single parent, didn't really know how to show love either. But it's something my family and I are all actively working on together as we're all trying to heal. It's the intergenerational trauma that comes with the effects of what had happened in Canada's history with residential school. And that's one of my things that I do with my business is I share a lot about truth and reconciliation and what all that means. I believe that you need to learn the truth before there is any sort of reconciliation. So the efforts of trying to mend something that we don't even know what has fully even happened yet is something that I think all of us as a whole need to start embracing, learning and like unlearning and relearning things, and just trying to better our society and get our Indigenous population into a place where we can be proud. But because there was 7 generations of residential school, it'll probably take 7 generations for us to get to a place where maybe one day we might be at a fair advantage in life. Being born an Indigenous woman, already the stats are against me. Technically, I am like, I could go missing and murdered and no one would look for my body. I have a high rate of being a part of domestic abuse that's rampant in our province. There are so many other things: homelessness, poverty, undiagnosed mental health, addictions. I'm really glad to say that none of those things plague me and my children. But because my mom and my uncle all went to residential school, that is something that they are dealing with on the daily. So my mom, my absolute role model, my best friend, she's just like the person I look up to, and I hope to be like half the person she is today, because when she left residential school, it didn't break her like it did for a lot of other kids. She is now a lawyer who teaches law in a sense that you need to be trauma informed so that you no longer do more harm to our community because of the legal profession and how triggering and harmful it is. My uncle went to the same residential school. He stayed there for 1.5 years longer than my mom. He and I have no relationship. He doesn't know my children, doesn't know me anymore. He is in active addictions in Vancouver on a street that you may not know called Hastings. I could have gone down a path of alcoholism if I hadn't acknowledged that I was suffering from anxiety that manifested in severe depression. And I wouldn't have had that awareness if it hadn't led me to a point where I had experienced significant self-harm that landed me in a hospital in a locked room. Mental illness wasn't really so much of a thing like 8, 9, 10 years ago. It's a new term that we're all starting to acknowledge and to embrace. And I'm grateful for that. I'm so grateful for that, because the way I felt in that moment of self-harm that landed me in the hospital for a day to get diagnosed, I don't want anyone to ever feel as hopeless as I had felt in that moment. There's nothing shameful in seeking help and getting help and learning how to manage mental illness. So I was actually just diagnosed with anxiety, and that manifested into severe depression. And then when I left the hospital, they didn't keep me because they didn't think I was a further harm to myself. I had to start citalopram, which is anxiety, depression meds. It has been 8 years since I started medication, and it has saved my life. It saved me. But I still had to do the work. I still had to figure out why my life was the way it was. I was in university. I was high stress. I managed 3 jobs because, like I said, I had undiagnosed anxiety, and I needed to be busy 24/7 in order to keep my mind at bay. Once I figured out some of the triggers, I had to make changes, which meant setting boundaries. And honestly, setting boundaries was one of the biggest things that has helped me today, even as an adult, navigate new relationships, being an entrepreneur, and just the ways in which I manage my life every day. And then also on top of setting boundaries, I also had to find ways in which I took care of myself. So self-care, that's huge right now. What do you guys do today in your life to help you manage anxiety, high stress situations, episodes of being upset? What do you guys do?
I walk in the bush.
You walk in the bush. I love that. Being outside in nature, honestly, it lowers your cortisol levels, helps you think. The air just opens it up for you. I love that.
I walk.
You walk? Yeah, I love that. That's great. What about you? Music. Obsessed with music. I think music is like absolutely one of those amazing things in your life that just helps you escape reality. When I was younger. Basketball, activity, absolutely. Like, what does that release? Endorphins? Yeah? Dopamine. There you go. Dopamine, which is the feel-good hormone. You play with your dog? I love that. What kind of dog do you have?
I don't know.
Yeah, pets are definitely the most loving beings ever. Like, they just love you unconditionally. And unconditional love in our life is what we need. Yeah.
I was going to say, keep a journal.
Journaling, absolutely. Writing out your feelings. What about baths? What about showers?
Oh, yeah.
Who likes water? Water is a healer. Taking care of yourself is so important, and it's not selfish. We live in a world today where thinking about yourself is like somehow frowned upon. But honestly, if you don't take care of you, how one day down the line are you going to take care of somebody else? Your own family, your own partner, people who actually truly matter to you.
I like doing artwork.
You like artwork? I love artwork. Well, actually, I never used to like artwork because I never thought I was an artistic kid growing up. But then when I started this journey of becoming a self-taught baker, I actually found out I am an edible artist because I don't just make cakes, I make cakes that look like something. Does anyone else say words of affirmations to yourself every day? Because I believe in the impact of repetition. And once you say something out loud many times, every morning, every night, it'll start to sink in. Hey, yeah, you know what? I love my body. I love my mind. I'm actually quite smart, and I'm definitely funny. Do you guys say nice things about yourself? I can do anything? Absolutely. You guys may not be saying anything, but you definitely should be saying something at home to yourself. There are so many things that you can do, and I don't want you guys to ever limit yourself because you literally can do whatever you want to do in this life. You know, going through the motions of going to high school, graduating high school, going to college, you know, finding the partner, having the babies, buying the house, you know, the pressures in the way we're supposed to live our life. You can do so much more than that. That is not all that's out there for you guys. And then I'm like, I need to reach more people and do more, but I can't do it alone. So I started a nonprofit. I started the nonprofit so I could access grants and funds, so I could reach more people and give to more people all year round instead of just seasonally. So we help low-income and unhoused communities in Saskatoon, whether it's through food drives, clothing drives, back-to-school stuff, haircut clinics, whatever it might be. The nonprofit that I created is going to start taking care of our community, and it revolves on a needs-based approach. So we're not just one thing only, and that's how we are. If there's a mental health epidemic, I'm going to be like, okay, like we got to do something for the youth to bring them coping mechanisms so we don't lose them. Suicide's at an all-time high, and I think that's absolute BS. There's no reason why you guys shouldn't feel like you don't have the tools in your life to overcome this tiny little moment in your life that feels so significant that it just suffocates you. So the Creative Foundation is just a bunch of people coming together to help a bunch of people who need it.
At one point during the event, there were some giddy young boys behind me, so I took the opportunity to ask them who their favorite speaker was.
You guys having a good day today?
Oh yeah, great day. Great
No.
Did you hear Dan talk yet?
Yeah.
So your favorite?
Take that, Brad and Jess.
To be fair, Dan was sitting right there with me, so I think the boys felt a little pressured to say him. The next speaker was Brad Swarovski, and he is an incredible dude from Saskatchewan as well. He lived his life for quite a while with addictions and overcame them, and now he's a mental health and addictions counselor, public speaker, and advocate.
I ran down to my bedroom, slammed the door behind me. Tears ran down my face. Tears of anger, tears of rage, but mostly tears of hurt. The physical stuff that happened at home was terrible, but the words were way, way worse. I think I was likely clinically depressed by the time I was 10 years old, but I didn't understand depression. I was 10 years old. I understood 10-year-old stuff. But we certainly didn't talk about mental health or any of that stuff. As a matter of fact, I didn't talk to anybody about what was going on in my life, because I was afraid if I talked to somebody about what was going on in my life, my dad might find out, and then I'd really, really be in for it. He was an alcoholic. And I loved him unconditionally. He was my hero, but I felt like most days he didn't love me. And I think this is where a lot of my problems started with mental health. Problems with self-worth, shame, stress, anxiety, depression, all of those things. I didn't talk to anybody. I certainly didn't trust anybody. And I didn't want to see or hear what was going on outside of my bedroom. And at 13 years of age, I was introduced to alcohol. And when I had my first drink, it took away some of my self-worth issues. And when I had my second drink, it took away some of the problems at home. When I had my third drink, it made my anxiety, my stress go away. And when I had my fourth drink, I was in a lot of trouble. You see, alcohol started to solve my problems. It started to make my mental health issues and my problems at home go away. And because of that, it became very problematic for me very quick. By the time I was 17, I was drinking 5 to 6 days a week. I almost didn't graduate from high school. I somehow managed to graduate from high school, got accepted into a post-secondary school. The year that I left, I got kicked out of that program for not attending. I got kicked out of the first house that I rented for not paying the rent because I spent all my money on alcohol. I got 2 impaired driving charges that year. I went to my first rehab, I went to my first detox, and I went to jail, all before I was 19 years of age. And this is pretty much what the next 20 years of my life was going to look like. It didn't take long till I found a job where I actually finally felt like I was at home. I was working in a nightclub. I was getting paid to hang out with girls. I loved girls. I was getting paid to listen to music. I was getting paid to basically party. And that's what I did, so that's what I loved. And it made my mental health go away for a while. But the problem is when I started to work in this nightclub, my drug use started to progress. It went from alcohol and a little bit of marijuana and some mushrooms to using some heavier, partier drugs like ecstasy and LSD. And then I got a promotion at the club that I worked at. So now I was using alcohol and all these party drugs and pills, and I was burnt right out. I was in a bad, bad place. And I remember at a party one night, one of my buddies was standing there, and it was 9 o'clock, and I said, I'm out of here. I got to go home. And he's like, what? And he took me into the bathroom, and he introduced me to a drug that would almost kill me, and it most certainly changed my life. He introduced me to cocaine. I started to hang around with specifically people that could get me cocaine, sell me cocaine, or used cocaine. An average day for me would look something like this. I would usually wake up at about 9 in the morning if I slept at all the night before. I would have serious withdrawals because I was drinking so much at that time that when I stopped drinking, my body would crave it. The only way that I knew to deal with these withdrawals is using more alcohol. So I would give my body more alcohol. I'd start drinking at 10 o'clock in the morning, and I'd have a drink, and I'd have another drink, and I'd have, usually by the time 5 o'clock in the afternoon rolled around, I would have already had 15 drinks. You get that drunk, sloppy feeling. And this would happen to me by 5 in the afternoon. I still had to work another 12 hours. So I would call my drug dealer. And cocaine is a central nervous system stimulant. So I'd be down here, I'd take cocaine, and it would bring me to here, and it would just level me off. And this is how the next 12 hours of my life would look. Drink, 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 take cocaine. Drink, 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 take cocaine. Until at 5 o'clock in the morning, I would take myself home from the nightclub, and I would either take pills and drink till I passed out, or I would use cocaine straight through till the next day. And this is how the next 7 years of my life looked like, until finally, one day I found myself face down on my apartment floor in a puddle of my own puke and urine, and it felt like there was somebody sitting on my chest. I got myself to the hospital, and I found out that day, at the age of 31 years old, that I'd had a cocaine, alcohol, and stress-induced heart attack. The doctor told me that day, he said, Brad, if you don't stop today, you will die. Not tomorrow. If you go out from this hospital and you use again, you will be dead. I can't die. I'm 31 years old, so I quit. I was surrounded by people who didn't support me, who didn't care. I didn't change that aspect. I didn't deal with any of the trauma that I had went through in my life. My dad was a very abusive person to me. When I quit drinking, I never talked to anybody about that. I just stuffed it down inside. I was in a near-fatal car accident when I was 21 years old. I didn't talk to anybody about that. My uncle killed himself, and my dad and I were the first people that found him. I carry that trauma to this day, but I definitely didn't talk about it back then. So it was no surprise 2 years later when the doctor gave me a clean bill of health that I started using again. And often what happens when you start up after you've stopped using drugs is you start up right where you finished off, or often worse. And this is what happened with me. And I was really a mess, but somewhere in the middle of this mess, I managed to meet a woman. And we dated for about 6 months. And she phoned me one day and she said, Brad, I need to talk to you. And I'm like, oh, she's dumping me. She said, Brad, I'm pregnant. And I said, oh, no, you're not. And she said, no, I am. And I said, no, you can't be. I said, I'm a mess. I'm just a boy. I can't handle this. And she said, I am. And you have to decide what you're going to do. So I tried to quit. I would quit for a couple weeks. Something would happen at home. I'd be stressed around having a baby, problems at work, and I'd use again. And then when I used again, I'd feel all these feelings that I recognized from my childhood, all this guilt and all this shame and all this self-worth problems and all these things. And the only way I knew how to deal with those was use again. Until on February 2nd, 2009, my beautiful daughter Kiara was born. And I remember I held that little girl in my arms that night, and I made a promise to that girl. I said, I'm going to be the father you deserve. And 8 hours later, I was using cocaine in the hospital parking lot with my drug dealer. So I added alcohol back into the mix. I'd quit my job. So now I was drinking, using cocaine, and I had no income. And what I did next, I'm still ashamed of to this day. I stole money. I stole my daughter's mom. I stole all of her money. I stole her credit cards. I stole all the money out of her bank account. I stole every penny we had. Money that was meant to put diapers on my little girl, that was meant to feed her, that was meant to keep a roof over her head. I stole it all. I got a job. This company that they knew me well, so they hired me. They also knew that I was a mess. The year was 2011. I spent more time in treatment programs and detoxes than I did out of them. And I knew that this company was going to fire me soon. I knew that I was on thin ice with them. But that wasn't enough to make me quit. My parents said, we can't have you around anymore. You steal from us. And this wasn't enough to make me quit. My sister said, we're scared to have you around our kids. You can't be around us anymore. This wasn't enough to make me quit. I started to have serious physical health problems at this time. There's only 2 drugs that can kill you when you're detoxing from them. One's alcohol and one's benzodiazepines. One's socially acceptable and one's prescribed by doctors, so hopefully you don't have those problems. And I was coming off of a substantial amount of alcohol, and I started to have seizures. When I was having one of these seizures, I bit halfway through my tongue. I got 27 stitches. I have no teeth in the back of my mouth because I broke them all off having seizures. This physical health problem wasn't enough to make me quit. I was losing friends. I was losing family. I was losing my life. I was losing my mind. And none of this was enough to make me quit. And then finally, one day, my daughter's mother phoned me and she said, Brad, where are you? And I said, what do you care? And she said, you're supposed to be here. I said, I'm not supposed to be there till Wednesday. She said, it is Wednesday. I thought it was Sunday. And this was like the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back for me. It felt like somebody ripped my heart out and threw it on the floor and stomped on it. And I had heard about this program through some guys that I worked with called the Teen Challenge Program. And I phoned my boss, and his name was Clayton. And I said, Clayton, I'm struggling. And he said, Brad, I know. And I said, I need help. And he said something to me at that point that I hadn't heard for a very long time. He said, I'm so proud of you. And I'm like, why is this guy proud of me? I haven't done anything to be proud of. And he said, it's hard. It's hard to reach out. It's hard to ask for help. I'm proud of you for doing that. But 3 months later, I walked up the steps of that Teen Challenge program, and I haven't touched a drop of alcohol or any drugs since. And I learned in that program for the first time, I'm not alone. I'm not the only person that struggles with mental health or addictions. And I graduated from that program a year later, and I went back out into the community. And I'd like to tell you that at that point, everything's been roses and sunshine ever since then. But it hasn't been. Life's hard. People started to reach out to me and say, like, hey man, things are looking pretty good for you. What are you doing? And I started talking to people, and I started helping people, and I realized this is what I want to do. I'd always wanted to be an addictions counselor ever since I got cleaned up. So I applied for school. The same day I got accepted for my student loans, I also got diagnosed with cancer. So I actually felt grateful, because I truthfully believe that if I would have got diagnosed, if I would have had cancer 8 or 10 years earlier, I wouldn't be on the stage talking to you guys right now. I wouldn't have recognized the health issues. I wouldn't have recognized the problems in myself. I wouldn't have had the supports. I wouldn't have had anything that I needed. I would have died in my addictions with cancer. So a month later, I had the surgery, and I'm happy to report that I'm still cancer-free to this day. Thank you. But it seemed like a no-brainer at this time with all the people that were coming to me and asking for help that I go back to school. So that's what I did. It was not easy for me. I've always had anxiety. I've a generalized anxiety disorder. I was never a good learner the first time around. I didn't think much was going to change. And the big thing that I learned there was about holistic self-care. I learned about the medicine wheel. And I learned that you need to take care of yourself on a holistic level, physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. And I heard that teaching, and it really spoke to me. And I still carry that practice in my private practice for mental health to this day. I learned I was only one different choice or one lack of support. If I didn't have the company that cared for me, the money that supported me, the mother that looked after me, if I didn't have those things, I would have been one of those people that I was helping. So I learned to never judge anyone. And I also learned another thing. I learned the only time you should ever look down on someone is if you're helping them up. And I'm truly blessed in a lot of areas of my life since I've sobered up and since I've started to work on my mental wellness. I have my daughter back in my life. I have split custody of my little girl. She's my angel. She's the reason that I stopped. Without her, I would not be here talking to you today, and I am absolutely certain of that. At about 6 years ago, I finally felt like I was healthy enough to have a relationship myself. I met a woman a year ago. We got married on a beach in Mexico, and I also inherited her 2 children. So now I have 3 daughters. When I was young, I didn't recognize my mental health problems. So the first step in getting better is recognition of mental health. Once you recognize that you have a mental health issue or a problem, then it's handling it in the appropriate way. And I also practice positive self-talk, because we need to be nice to ourselves. When we're thinking about the mind, we need to think about how we speak to ourselves, because if I spoke to some of the people in this crowd the way that I spoke about myself, they'd punch me in the face. We can't bury these negative emotions. We just need to find proper ways to deal with them. If you're going to be happy, you're also going to be angry sometimes. You have to balance that out. And spiritually, I just say do anything that makes your soul happy. Don't get caught up on the spiritual part. Do what makes your soul happy. Revealing is healing. You need to put a voice to it. You don't have to stand up on a stage like I do in front of a whole bunch of people and dump it all out for everybody, but you need to find your somebody and share that with them. You need to find your teacher, your counselor, your parent, your significant other. And I'll tell you what, if you can't find anybody, go to www.bradsorosky.com and reach out to me, and I'll be there for you. I shared my story with you guys today. I hope that you guys can all write great chapters to the end of yours.
There was countless people that put on the event and helped with Youth Matter every week and every day, from board members to volunteers. The face of Youth Matter, however, is Laura Lawrence. She is the creator, and she's also an advocate. She is a children's book author, public speaker, So I sat down with her afterwards and interviewed her and got to know her a little better. How long has Youth Mattered? Well, like how long ago did you start that?
So the idea kind of came about in 2019, kind of the spring of 2019. But I've been working with youth my whole entire life, since I was a teen myself, and then for a couple decades as a teacher. So I've always really been quite passionate about working with youth, serving youth, holding space for youth. But the actual inception idea of the concept of providing a mental wellness platform support for youth came about in about 2019. So about 4 years ago. Well, most of my creative sparks literally come out of nowhere. It's like, I actually vividly remember my husband and I were driving to Saskatoon. I don't know if it was like a date night or what. And I just said to him, wouldn't it be really cool if I could create a conference for kids that was mental health themed, where we could bring these kids together, put together a high energy day with impactful speakers, inspirational stories, some extra support, just give them this like really memorable day to go home and just feel really energized, really inspired. And I think it came from the fact that I've been a teacher my whole life and also working in some sales opportunities, attending some really powerful professional development workshops, seminars, conferences that were life-changing for me. I thought, how cool would that be to create something like that for kids? Les Hewitt, actually, he was the co-author of Chicken Soup for the Soul with Jack Canfield. I had the opportunity to listen to him, I think about maybe 10 years ago, but I'll never forget that because it was one of those conferences where I really resonated with what he was saying, the inspiration, the encouragement. And I remember one of the things that he said, and I actually said it to my husband the other day. I'll never forget that he said, if you're an entrepreneur, you're a creator, you're somebody who's just never stops, go, go, go. You need to make sure that every quarter you plan something just for you. So you're doing something that you have to look forward to, whether it be like a trip or a conference or a workshop or, something like that. That makes sense, to really stay energized, to stay focused. And then you can just like go back into everyday normal life with this confidence of, I'm not alone. Everybody else is feeling the same chaos as I am. But I got extra inspiration to just like keep going or to keep creating. So I wanted to create something like that for kids. So that's how the Youth Matter Symposium started. What happened during COVID is when the schools were shut down and kids were very isolated and they were taken out of that social dynamic that's actually very necessary for kids. I mean, the schools shutting down created a massive impact on the mental health of kids. And so we wanted to provide some sort of connection opportunity outside of that. So we started something called Teen Talk Tuesday. And when we started Teen Talk Tuesday, it was, which you were a guest on.
I was.
So we would just, and it was fantastic. We started this platform. It was a peer support connection platform on Zoom. And I reached out to, a couple of people who are passionately working with Youth Matter, and we got together every Tuesday as part of the support team. And then we would invite different speakers to come share their lived experience with the youth. And we had over 100 kids register and come through that. It was predictable. It was consistent. It was fun. The kids just really, we created this really great community, which continues now 3 years later. And then since then, we incorporated it as a nonprofit organization in 2021. So we could kind of take it to the next level. That's part of the mission with Youth Matter, is to use music, movement, mindfulness, art, culture, those really right-brained concepts and activities to engage kids in passive, fun healing, really. So what we want to try to convey to the youth is that healing can happen in a number of different ways. And we have, a more traditional, conventional way of helping to support our mental health, but we can't forget about some of the other ways that are just as powerful to support and also maybe more so prevent some of the mental health challenges, disorders, just by staying engaged with community, art, music, culture, movement. There's so much research that all of those things really help to actively support brain health, which, then supports mental health. So it does help being a teacher and having worked with kids for 20 years to know, like, they're a tough audience. Besides teachers can be a tough audience too. Kids, you really got to light it up and you got to bring it. And we're so fortunate the last number of years to have some really fantastic presenters and speakers and volunteers. So last year we accessed some grant money and we went into 13 different schools across Saskatchewan offering a program that we call Be Kind to Your Mind. So we had a travel team, consisted of myself, so an educator, a social worker, and then also a social work student. And we would go into schools and do 60-minute presentations to students grades 4 to 12, really talking about mental wellness, addressing stigma, helping students to look at how they can develop a mental health maintenance plan for lifelong wellness. We did that through sharing our own lived experiences, the team's experiences of how it's changed throughout the course of our life, what our mental health maintenance plan might have looked like when we were teens versus what they looked like as young adults, as like now married. And so it really just conveys this lifelong message of it's a lifelong journey taking care of your mental wellness. We really want kids to know that they don't have to wait till it's too late to take action. I think that if we continue to look at a reactive approach to mental wellness versus a proactive and a preventative approach, we're never going to catch up. And there'll never be enough money, enough resources, enough professionals to serve the need of the mental health crisis in this province and beyond. This is really providing connection, community, and a healthy outlet for kids to deal with everything that they're carrying. Because I think so often we just say kids are so resilient because they carry it well. After the first symposium, we had a set of twins attend from a nearby community, and I know their mother quite well. And they were 16 years old at the time. And she had called me and said, you know what? One of my sons had a panic attack the one day while he was driving, and he pulled over to the side of the road and he used one of the calming and regulating practices that you taught him. And he was able to get himself out of that state of dysregulation. He was able to bring himself back, get out of the panic attack. And he was so grateful to be able to have that small tool that he could use, and he could use for his own self-regulation and his own self-awareness. And then he said, if you give us the tools, Mom, we can change the future. And it just gave me goosebumps to hear that. That keeps me going. That lights us up as an organization when we hear from the kids. There's over 400 beds in this province for psychiatric or inpatient care for adults that are struggling with major mental health issues. And there are 10 beds for kids. Like, what the hell? Give kids a voice. They will tell you. Like, they are brilliant. They are problem solvers. They can see in 180 degrees. Just give them a chance to get a space at the table, and talk about this whole approach to mental wellness and support, and you'll get some really good answers. It's easy to see the marginalized communities of youth and how their journey is different in many ways from youth who maybe have more privilege, more access, more opportunity. But what I will say is that often I think that we assume as well, based on a certain background, socioeconomic background, culture, race, identity, whatever it may be, that a youth may or may not have it harder than the next youth. And I think one of the biggest lessons that I've learned in this last year, which I always knew working with youth, is that you can't ever assume, based on where a youth has come from or what their upbringing is, the state of their mental wellness. That's one of the things that we talk about too in our Be Kind to Your Mind travel tour program is we talk about the kids. We have this big conversation of like, what does mental health look like? How can you tell just today by looking at me that I have a good grasp on my mental health or I'm doing well? And in that conversation, we can really destigmatize what we think it looks like and it doesn't look like. But what I can say is we have had absolutely opportunities to learn and grow as an organization in terms of truth and reconciliation efforts and listening, getting ourselves in the rooms and at the tables of people from marginalized communities like our Indigenous population who really, really out of the gate have much harder struggles and, come from generations of trauma. And so absolutely, we recognize that, and we want to incorporate the culture and the learning and the unlearning in the work that we're doing, not just, with Indigenous youth, but also with newcomers. We have a lot of youth in the Northeast who are newcomers. Their families have come to Canada seeking, a more peaceful life. They're coming from war-torn countries, or they're coming from places that are not safe. And I think what I've learned the most is, you just can't assume by looking at a kid that you know how it's going for them at home. I think one of the things I'm most surprised with, I thought that as an organization advocating for mental health for youth, because of course this all takes money. We don't have any provincial or federal funding. Our organization is not funded federally or provincially. So it relies solely on the generosity of businesses and corporations who are looking to support mental wellness for youth. So I did think it would be a lot easier to find money for mental health for kids. Turns out, there's been a lot of generosity thrown our way, and we have organizations and businesses who consistently support us every year. But in order to take it to the next level and to do, continue to go into schools and present for free, because listen, money is a barrier for schools. They don't got a whole lot of money to do a whole lot of nothing. So when you say to a principal or a school, listen, we're going to come in, we're going to do this for free, the answer is always, we love free. When can you come? There are so many ways we can connect and heal and support our mental wellness. I think the broader we look at, anything can be added to that tool belt. I think the better it is for all of us. And my good friend and author idol, Dr. Jody Carrington, said, if the big people aren't okay, the little ones don't stand a chance. I totally agree with you. Kids' books, kids' movies, they're not actually for kids. They provide this opportunity for the parents to connect with the kids through this really powerful, important messaging. So Lily is a character that I developed. The first book was Lily's loud mouth. She has a superpower of a big mouth. She speaks up in a world that normally silences girls and women, but she just doesn't really take no for an answer. And she changes the world with, love and kindness and empathy, becomes a teacher. And then the next one was Lily's Heavy Heart, where it's a gentle introduction to grief and loss for kids. Now, the third one is called Lily's Magnificent Mind. And in that, she has ADHD, and she has a very busy brain that she gets into trouble at school, she gets into trouble at home, but she's got the most beautiful, imaginative, creative mind. And it was cool when I did an author talk a couple weeks ago, and I said to the kids, okay, I have another one coming out with Lily, and this time she has ADHD. And you should have seen the eyes light up for the kids in the room who are they felt seen. They were I have ADHD. They actually could be okay with verbalizing that and saying, I have this, So I'm going to write kids' books till the day I die. My big person book, this one is called Behind Closed Doors, Memoirs of Motherhood, Marriage, and Mental Health. So what I did is 5 years ago, I started a mental health movement called Strong as a Mother. Because again, I wanted to create a community and a platform for women to just get together and talk about all the hard things and laugh and cry and come for coffee once a month, just kind of sink into all the things that we're not really talking about in public. And what I did is I took 13 stories from that platform. So from 13 women, I interviewed them again, and then I wrote about it. And I wrote in pieces and parts of my story throughout the book to kind of segue and put all of the stories together. And what it is, it's a collection really of healing and hope and the light after the darkness that everybody can identify with, whether you are male or female or young or old. I think we all can identify with two things which are inevitable: love and pain.
Thank you so much, Laura Lawrence, all the board and all the volunteers. It was an incredible event. And if you want to check things out for next year for your school or for Teen Talk Tuesdays, go to youthmatter.ca and all the information is there. So that's it for this bonus episode in the middle of the week. Keep listening. There's going to be amazing episodes coming up with incredible people again. And so until next time, please remember to make your beds and take your meds. Bye.